nitrate. By itself or as a soap builder, this alkali is a very effective cleaner. This fact adds force to Jehovah's words as to the depth of Israel's sinfulness. Though you should do the washing with alkali and take to yourself large quantities of lye, your error would certainly be a stain before me. 2. 22. The ancient world obtained this alkali from several sources of supply. From lakes or from deposits in Syria, India, Egypt, and along the southeastern shores of the Dead Sea. It is reported that, in addition to using it textoi acute muritra longo, law 211 potash. The Hebrew word bor is translated potash NW, so big, liat, at Job 9. 30. There it is spoken of as being used for cleansing the hands. This cleanser is thought to be either potassium carbonate or sodium carbonate. 9. 14. It therefore appears that Christian prayers regarding officials of the world are not without limitation. The Apostles' further words indicate that such prayers are ultimately in favor of God's people, in order that we may go on leading a calm and quiet life with full godly devotion and seriousness. 1t2. Two earlier examples illustrate this. Nehemiah prayed that God would give him pity before King Artaxerxes. Any 1. 11. Compare Ge 43. 14. And Jehovah instructed the Israelites to seek the peace of the city Babylon in which they would be exiled, praying on its behalf, since in its peace there will prove to be peace for you yourselves. Ge 29. 7. Similarly, Christians prayed concerning the threats of the rulers in their day. Act 4. 23-30, and undoubtedly their prayers in behalf of imprisoned Peter also involved the officials with authority to release him. Act 12. 5. In harmony with Christ's counsel, they prayed for those persecuting them. Mount 5. 44. Compare Act 26. 28, 29. Row 10. 1-3. Giving thanks for God's provisions, O textoi acute muritra longo, prayer 670. And ambitions are not, as such texts as Matthew 6. 19-34 and 1 John 2. 15-17 show. Nor can one rightly pray for those whom God condemns. Ge 7. 16. 11. 14. Romans 8. 26, 27 shows that the Christian, under certain circumstances, will not know just what to pray for. But his own uttered groanings are nonetheless understood by God. The Apostle shows that it is by means of God's Spirit, or active force. It should be remembered that it was by His Spirit that God inspired the Scriptures. 2t3. 16, 17. 2p1. 21. These included events and circumstances similar to those that would come upon His servants in later times, and showed the way in which God would guide His servants and bring them the help they needed. Row 15. 4. 1p1. 6-12. It may not be until after the needed help has been received that the Christian realizes that what he might have prayed for but did not know how to was already set forth in God's Spirit-inspired word. Compare 1 Code 2. 9, 10. The answering of prayers. Although God anciently carried on a measure of two-way communication with certain individuals, this was not common, for the most part being restricted to special representatives, such as Abraham and Moses. Ge 15. 1-5. X3. 11-15. Compare X20. 19. Even then, with the exception of when he spoke to her about his son while on earth, God's words were evidently transmitted through angels. Compare X3. 2, 4. G3. 19. Messages delivered personally by materialized angels were likewise uncommon, as is evidenced by the disturbed effect they generally produced on the receivers. JG 6. 22. Boo 1. 11, 12, 26-30. The answering of prayers in the majority of cases, therefore, was through prophets or by the granting of, or the refusal to grant, the request. Jehovah's answers to prayers often had a clearly recognizable effect, as when he delivered his servants from their enemies 2ch20. 1-12, 21-24, or when he provided for their physical needs in times of dire scarcity. X15. 22-25, but undoubtedly the most frequent answer was not so easily discernible, since it related to giving moral strength and enlightenment, enabling the person to hold to a righteous course and carry out divinely assigned work. 2T4. 17. Particularly for the Christian, the answer to prayers involved matters mainly spiritual, not as spectacular as some powerful acts of God in earlier times, but equally vital. Mount 9. 36-38. Col 1. 9. Heb 13. 18. Juz 5. 13. Acceptable prayer must be made to the right person, Jehovah God. On right matters, those in harmony with God's declared purposes. In the right manner, through God's appointed way, Christ Jesus. And with a right motive and a clean heart. Compare Juz 4. 3-6. Along with all of this, there is need for persistence. Jesus said to keep on asking, seeking, and knocking, not giving up. Luke 11. 5-10. 18. 1-7. He raised the question as to whether, at his future arrival, he would find faith in the power of prayer on earth. Luke 18. 8. The seeming delay on God's part in answering some prayers is not due to any inability nor to a lack of willingness, as the scriptures make clear. Mount 7. 9-11. Juz 1. 5, 17. In some cases the answer must await God's timetable. Luke 18. 7. 1 Pe 5. 6. 2 Pe 3. 9. Re 6. 9-11. Primarily, however, it is evident that God allows his petitioners to demonstrate the depth of their concern, the intensity of their desire, the genuineness of their motive. PS 50. An account of versions, or translations, of the scriptures will engender gratitude to Jehovah God for the wonderful way in which he has preserved his word for the benefit of mankind's millions. Ancient versions of the Hebrew scriptures. Extant today are possibly 6,000 ancient manuscripts of all or portions of the Hebrew scriptures, written in Hebrew with the exception of a few Aramaic sections. Known to be still in existence are also many manuscripts of old versions, or translations, of the Hebrew scriptures in various languages. Some versions were in themselves translations of earlier translations from the Hebrew. For instance, the Hebrew scripture portion of the Old Latin version was rendered from the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures. On the other hand, some ancient versions of the Hebrew scriptures, the Greek Septuagint, Aramaic Targums, the Syriac Peshitta, and the Latin Vulgate, were made directly from the Hebrew and not through the medium of a version in Greek or some other language. Samaritano Textoi Acute Longo, versions 1152, assumed their present form no earlier than about the 5th century CE. One of the principal Targums, the Targum of Enkelos on the Pentateuch, is rather literal. Another, the so-called Targum of Jonathan for the Prophets, is less literal. Extant today are Targums on most books of the Hebrew scriptures except Ezra, Nehemiah, and Daniel. The Greek Septuagint. The Greek Septuagint, often designated LXX, was used by Greek-speaking Jews and Christians in Egypt and elsewhere. Reportedly, work on it commenced in Egypt in the days of Ptolemy Philadelphus 285,246 BCE when, according to tradition, the Pentateuch thereof was translated into Greek by 72 Jewish scholars. Later, the number 70 somehow came to be used, and the version of the Pentateuch was referred to as the Septuagint, meaning 70. The other books of the Hebrew scriptures by various translators, whose style varied from quite literal to rather free rendition, were gradually added until translation of the entire Hebrew scriptures had finally been completed during the 2nd century BCE, and perhaps by 150 BCE thereafter the entire work came to be known as the Septuagint. This version is often quoted by writers of the Christian Greek scriptures. Apocryphal writings were evidently inserted in the Greek Septuagint sometime after it was first completed. See Apocrypha. One of the oldest extant manuscripts of the Greek Septuagint is Papyrus 957, the Rylands Papyrus 3. 458, preserved in the John Rylands Library, Manchester, England. It is of the 2nd century BCE and consists of fragments of Deuteronomy 23, 24, 24, 3, 25, 1-3, 26, 12, 17-19. 28. 31-33. Another manuscript, of the 1st century BCE is Papyrus Fuad 266 possessed by the Société Égyptienne de Papyrologie, Cairo, containing parts of the second half of Deuteronomy according to the Greek Septuagint. In various places therein, the tetragrammaton E in English of the divine name is found in a form of square Hebrew characters right within the Greek script. See picture, Volume 1, p. 326. Jehovah. The Greek Septuagint has thus been preserved in numerous manuscripts, many fragmentary, others fairly complete. Notably, the Septuagint texts are preserved in the 3 famous uncial manuscripts written on vellum. The Vatican manuscript No. 1209 and the Sinaitic manuscript, both of the 4th century CE, and the Alexandrine manuscript of the 5th century CE. The Septuagint is found in the Vatican manuscript No. 1209 is almost complete. Part of the Hebrew scriptures once included in the Sinaitic manuscript has been lost. That in the Alexandrine manuscript is rather complete, though lacking parts of Genesis, 1 Samuel, and Psalms. Later Greek versions. In the 2nd century, Aquila, a Jewish proselyte of Pontus, made a new and very literal Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures. Except for fragments and quotations thereof by early writers, it has perished. Another Greek translation of the same century was produced by Theodotion. His was apparently a revision of the Septuagint or some other Greek version of the Hebrew scriptures, though he considered the Hebrew text itself. No complete copy of Theodotion's version is extant. Another Greek version of the Hebrew scriptures of which no complete copy is extant was that of Symmachus. His rendition, probably translated about 200 CE, endeavored to convey the right sense rather than to be literal. About 245 CE Origen, the noted scholar of Alexandria, Egypt, completed a mammoth multiple version of the Hebrew scriptures called the Hexapla, which means sixfold. Though fragments of it are extant, no complete manuscript copy has survived. Origen arranged the text in 6 parallel columns containing 1 the consonantal Hebrew text, 2 a Greek transliteration of the Hebrew text, 3 Aquila's Greek version, 4 Symmachus' Greek version, 5 the Septuagint, revised by Origen to correspond au textoi acute miritra longo. Versions 1153 renditions of other books of the Christian Greek scriptures once existed, but there are no extant manuscripts thereof. All books of the Christian Greek scriptures except 2 Peter, 2 and 3 John, Jude, and Revelation were included in the Syriac Peshitta of the 5th century. In about 508 CE Philoxenus, Bishop of Hierapolis, had Polycarp make a revision of the Peshitta Christian scriptures, and it was the first time 2 Peter, 2 and 3 John, Jude, and Revelation were added to a Syriac version. The Christian Greek scriptures had already been to Jerusalem and met with James and all the older men, relating to them the results of his work and receiving their counsel on certain matters. Act 21. 15-26. In a few cases the term older men is used in contrast with younger men or in parallel with older women with no indication of congregational responsibility being involved. In such cases, the term refers simply to men of mature age. Act 2. 17, 18. 1-5. 1, 2 It is also used to refer to men of old times. Heb 11. 2 However, in most cases in the Christian Greek scriptures, the older men were those responsible for the direction of the congregation. In a few texts the older men are called overseers gr. e.pisco.poi. Bishops, kj. Paul used this term in speaking to the older men from the one congregation of Ephesus, and he applied it to such ones in his letter to Titus. Act 20. 17, 28. Tit 1. 5, 7 Both terms, therefore, refer to the same role, pre-middle.spe-to-middle.ros indicating the mature qualities of the one so appointed, and d-middle.pisco-middle.pos the duties inherent with the appointment. Regarding the Greek word pre-middle.spe-to-middle.ros, Manuel Guerra Gomez noted. The precise translation of the term pre-middle.spe-to-middle.ros in almost the majority of the Hellenistic texts that have survived until now, is that of older man, synonym of mature man. Maturity of judgment and guiding criterion is its distinctive note. whether or not it has a technical sense. The term pre-middle-ros both in the Hellenistic and the Israelite worlds designates, not the ailing elderly, but rather the mature man, suitable by his experience and prudence for the ruling of his family or of his people. Episcopo y Presbyteros, Burgos, Spain, 1962, pages 117, 257. That age, in the physical sense of years lived, was a factor for qualifying to serve as an older man in ancient Israel is evident. 1 Chi 12. 6-13 So, too, the older men, or overseers, in the Christian congregation were not young men, as is evidenced by the apostles' reference to their having wives and children. Tit 1. 5, 6. 1 T 3. 2, 4, 5 Nevertheless, physical age was not the sole or primary factor, as is seen by the other qualifications set forth 1 T 3. 2-7. Tit 1. 6-9, nor is any specific age level stipulated. Timothy, who had to do with appointing older men, was obviously also recognized as one himself, though relatively young. 1 T 4. 12. The requirements for the responsibility as an older man in the Christian congregation included a high standard of conduct and spirituality. The ability to teach, to exhort, and to reprove played a major part in one's being accredited as an older man. 1 T 3. 2. Tit 1. 9 Paul solemnly charged Timothy to preach the word, be it urgently in favorable season, in troublesome season, reprove, reprimand, exhort, with all long-suffering and art of teaching. 2 T 4. 2 As shepherds, the older men are responsible for the spiritual feeding of the flock, as well as for caring for those spiritually ill and for protecting the flock against wolfish elements. Act 20. 28-35. Just 5. 14, 15. 1 PE 5. 2-4 Additionally, Paul, who had himself been zealous in teaching publicly and from house to house, reminded Timothy of his responsibility to do the work of an evangelizer, fully accomplish your ministry. Act 20. 20. 2 T 4. 5. Each Christian congregation had its body of older men, or overseers, these regularly being mentioned in the plural, as at Jerusalem Act 11. 30. 15. 4, 6. 21. 18, at Ephesus Act 20. 17, 28, at Philippi PHP 1. 1. The body of older men gr. Pre-B-re-on is mentioned with regard to the laying of hands on Timothy. 1 T 4. 14 The older men, as the overseers o textoi acute miritra longo. Olive 551 Following remark is found in the Acts of the Apostles, by F. F. Bruce 1970, p. 286. Although the etymological sense of k-middle.ro-middle.to-middle.neo is to elect by show of hands, it came to be used in the sense designate, appoint. Cf. The same word with prefix pro, before in x. 41. Liddell and Scott's Greek English Lexicon, after first giving common definitions to k-middle.ro-middle.to-middle.neo, says. Later, generally, appoint. Appoint to an office in the church. Revised by H. Jones, Oxford, 1968, p. 1986 Likewise, Parkhurst's Greek and English Lexicon to the New Testament London, 1845, p. 673 says. With an accusative following, to appoint or constitute to an office, though without suffrages or votes. The role to which these Christian men were appointed was that of alderman, or elder, without any supporting pull to remain obedient to Jehovah. Faced with Philistine aggression, Saul fails to obey Jehovah and wait for Samuel's arrival, offering sacrifices himself. Samuel tells him that because of this his kingdom will not last. Saul defeats the Amalekites, but he disobediently preserves alive King Agag and the best of the animals. Samuel tells Saul he is rejected by Jehovah as king and that obedience is more important than sacrifice. David comes to prominence, and this angers Saul. 16. 1. 20. 42 Samuel anoints David, and Jehovah's spirit leaves Saul. David becomes a harpist for Saul to soothe him when disturbed. David kills the Philistine champion Goliath, and a deep friendship develops between David and Saul's son Jonathan. Placed over Saul's warriors, David gains repeated victories and is celebrated in song more than Saul. Saul becomes jealous twice. Saul's attempts to kill David fail, as does his scheme to have David die at the hands of the Philistines. While procuring the bride price for Saul's daughter Michal despite his promise to Jonathan, Saul for a third time tries to kill David, and David flees to Samuel at Ramah. Jonathan unsuccessfully tries to intercede for David with his father. He warns David, and he and David make a covenant. David's life as a fugitive. 21. 1. 27. 12 At Nob, high priest Ahimelech gives David food and Goliath's sword. David then flees to Gath, where he escapes harm by acting insane. He takes refuge in the cave of Adullam and then in the forest of Hereth. Saul has Ahimelech and everyone in Nob killed. Ahimelech's son Abithar survives and comes to David. David saves Keilah from Philistines, but afterward he leaves the city to avoid being surrendered to Saul. Neotextoi acute miritra longo. Samuel, books of 853. Serving alive King Agag and the best of the Amalekite flock and herd. In response to Saul's plea, Samuel appeared with him before the older men of Israel and the people. After that Samuel commanded that Agag be brought to him. On then went hacking him to pieces before Jehovah in Gilgal. 1 Samuel 15. 10-33. Anoints David. When the two men parted, they had no further association. Samuel, however, went into mourning for Saul. But Jehovah God interrupted his mourning, commissioning him to go to Bethlehem to anoint one of the sons of Jesse as Israel's future king. To avoid any suspicion on Saul's part that might result in Samuel's death, Jehovah directed that Samuel take along a cow for sacrifice. Perhaps fearing that Samuel had come to reprove or punish some wrongdoing, the older men of Bethlehem trembled. But he assured them that his coming meant peace and then arranged for Jesse and his sons to share in a sacrificial meal. Impressed by the appearance of Jesse's firstborn Eliab, Samuel reasoned that this son must surely be Jehovah's choice for the kingship. But neither Eliab nor any of the other 6 sons of Jesse present had been chosen by Jehovah. Therefore, at Samuel's insistence, the youngest son, David, was called from pasturing the sheep, and then at Jehovah's direction Samuel anointed David in the midst of his brothers. 1 Samuel 15. 34. 16. 13. Later, after King Saul had made several attempts on his life, David fled to Samuel at Ramah. The two men then went to Naioth, and David remained there until Saul personally came to look for him. 1 Samuel 19. 18. 20. 1 During the time David was still under restriction because of Saul, Samuel died. And all Israel proceeded to collect together and bewail him and bury him at his house in Ramah. 1 Samuel 25. 1 Thus Samuel died as an approved servant of Jehovah God after a lifetime of faithful service. PS 99. 6. Jah 15. 1. Heb 11. 32 He had demonstrated persistence in fulfilling his commission. 1 Samuel 16. 6. 11. Devotion to true worship. 1 Samuel 7. 3-6. Honesty in his dealings. 1 Samuel 12. 3. Encourage and firmness in announcing and upholding Jehovah's judgments and decisions. 1 Samuel 10. 24. 13. 13. 15. 32, 33. Regarding the account of Saul's request for the spirit medium Adam Dor to bring up Samuel for him, see Saul number 1. Samuel, books of 2 books of the Hebrew scriptures that apparently were not divided in the original Hebrew canon. Indicative of this is a note in the Masorah showing that words in 1 Samuel, chapter 28, one of the concluding chapters of 1 Samuel, were in the middle of the book. Writers and time covered. Ancient Jewish tradition credits Samuel with the writership of the first part of the book, and Nathan and Gad with the remaining portion. That these 3 prophets did write is confirmed at 1 Chronicles 29. 29. The book itself reports, Samuel spoke to the people about the rightful due of the kingship and wrote it in a book and deposited it before Jehovah. 1 Samuel 10. 25 However, on the basis of 1 Samuel 27. 6, where there is reference to the kings of Judah, Numerous scholars place the final compiling of the books of Samuel sometime after the 10-tribe kingdom of Israel came into existence. If the expression the kings of Judah denotes only Judean kings of the 2-tribe kingdom, this would show that the writings of Samuel, Nathan, and Gad must have been put into final form by someone else. On the other hand, if the kings of Judah simply means kings from the tribe of Judah, these words could have been recorded by Nathan, since he lived under the rulership of 2 Judean kings, David and Solomon. 1 Chiron 32-34. To the heavens is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 large measures of flour, until the whole mass was fermented. Mount 13. 33. Luke 13. 20, 21. Though there is no direct evidence, it has been suggested that the Jews also used wine dregs as yeast. Israel's grain offerings presented by fire to Jehovah were not to be made with dough. Lot 2. 11. Also, the Israelites were expressly commanded not to have dough here, an apparent symbol of corruption and sin, in their homes or within the boundaries of their territory during the 7-day festival of unleavened bread. Acts 12. 15. 13. 7. 16. For anyone eating something leavened during that time was to be cut off from the assembly of Israel. Acts 12. 19. In ancient Egypt it was also customary, when baking, to set aside some dough, to be used for leavening fresh dough. Even today, when the kneading of dough has been completed, some people of Cyprus, for instance, put aside a piece of dough in a warm place. After 36 to 48 hours it can be used to ferment an entire lump of new dough. Paul may have had dough in mind when he urged the Corinthians, "Clear away the old leaven, men, that you may be a new lump, according as you are free from ferment." 1 Co 5. 7. See leaven. South. See Negeb. Sovereignty. Supremacy and rule or power. The dominion or rule of a lord, king, emperor, or the like. The power that, in the final analyses, determines the government of a state. In the Hebrew scriptures the word adhomiddle.ne appears frequently, and the expression adhomiddle.ne 285 times. Adhomiddle.ne is a plural form of amiddle.dawn, meaning lord. Master. The plural form adhomiddle.ne may be applied to men in simple plurality, as lords, or masters. But the term adhomiddle.ne without an additional suffix is always used in the scriptures with reference to God, the plural being employed to denote excellence or majesty. It is most frequently rendered Lord by translators. When it appears with the name of God adhomiddle.ne, as, for example, at Psalm 73. 28, the expression is translated Lord God at KJRS. Lord God die 72. 28. Lord, my Master KX 72. 28. Lord Jehovah Ig. Sovereign Lord Jehovah NW. In Psalms 47. 9. 138. 5. 150. 2. Moffat uses the word sovereign, but not to translate adhomiddle.ne. The Greek word domiddle.spotes means one who possesses supreme authority, or absolute ownership and uncontrolled power. Vine's Expository Dictionary of Old and New Testament Words, 1981, Volume 3, pages 1846. It is translated Lord, Master, Owner, and when used in direct address to God is rendered Lord KJ, Ig, and others, Ruler of all KX, Sovereign Lord NW, at Luke 2. 29, Acts 4. 24, and Revelation 6. 10. In the last text, Knox, the New English Bible, Moffat, and the Revised Standard Version read Sovereign Lord. Young's translation and the Kingdom Interlinear read Master. So, while the Hebrew and Greek texts do not have a separate qualifying word for sovereign, the flavor is contained in the words adhomiddle.ne and domiddle.spotes when they are used in the scriptures as applying to Jehovah God, the qualification denoting the excellence of his lordship. Jehovah's sovereignty. Jehovah God is the sovereign of the universe, sovereign of the world, PS 47. 9. Mo by reason of his creatorship, his godship, o textoi acute miritra longo. Sovereignty 1009. David was made king of Israel, and the scriptures speak of the kingdom of David as though it was his kingdom. But David acknowledged Jehovah as the great sovereign ruler, saying, "Yours, O Jehovah, are the greatness and the mightiness and the beauty and the excellency and the dignity. For everything in the heavens and in the earth is yours. Yours is the kingdom, O Jehovah, the one also lifting yourself up as head over all." 1 Ch 29. 11. Earthly rulers. The rulers of the nations of earth exercise their limited rulership by the toleration or permission of the sovereign Lord Jehovah. That the political governments do not receive their authority from God, that is, that they are not acting by reason of any grant of authority or power from him, is shown at Revelation 13. 1, 2, where the seven-headed, ten-horned wild beast is said to get its power and its throne and great authority from the dragon, Satan the devil. Re 12. 9. Sea beasts, symbolic. So, while God has allowed various rulerships of men to come and go, one of their mighty kings, after having had demonstrated, in his own experience, the fact of Jehovah's sovereignty, was moved to say, "His rulership is a rulership to time indefinite, and his kingdom is for generation after generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth are being considered as merely nothing, and he is doing according to his own will among the army of the heavens and the inhabitants of the earth. And there exists no one that can check his hand or that can say to him, 'What have you been doing?'" Darfur 34, 35. Accordingly, as long as it is God's will to permit man-made governments to rule. This verdict was rendered, and he was sentenced to death. After this they spit in his face and hit him with their fists, taunting him, contrary to the law. Mount 26. 57-68. Lu 22. 66-71. Compared to 25. 1, 2 with Joe 7. 51 and Act 23. 3. After this illegal night trial the Sanhedrin met early in the morning to confirm their judgment and for a consultation. Mr. 15. 1 Jesus was now led, again bound, to the governor's palace, to Pilate, since they said, "It is not lawful for us to kill anyone." Joe 18. 31. Here Jesus was charged with forbidding the paying of taxes to Caesar and with saying that he himself was Christ the King. Blasphemy against the God of the Jews would not have been so serious a charge in the eyes of the Romans, but sedition would. Pilate, after making futile attempts to get Jesus to testify against himself, told the Jews that he found no crime in him. Discovering, however, that Jesus was a Galilean, Pilate was happy to send him to Herod, who had jurisdiction over Galilee. Herod questioned Jesus, hoping to see a sign performed by him, but Jesus refused. Herod then discredited Jesus, making fun of him, and sent him back to Pilate. Lu 23. 1-11. Pilate now tried to release Jesus in harmony with a custom of that time, but the Jews refused, calling for the release of a seditionist and murderer instead. Joe 18. 38-40. Pilate therefore had Jesus scourged, and the soldiers again mistreated him. After this, Pilate brought Jesus outside and tried to get his release, but the Jews insisted. "Impale him! Impale him!" Finally he issued the order to have Jesus impaled. Mount 27. 15-26. Lu 23. 13-25. Joe 19. 1-16. What laws of God did the Jewish text to acute Miritra Longo will have him 236 possessed by many demons? Possibly the chief one of these demons caused this man to say that his name was Legion. The fact that in the 1st century CE Roman legions usually consisted of 6,000 men may give some indication of the large number of demons involved. So fierce were the demon-possessed man and his companion that no one dared to pass the area where they had their dwelling among the tombs. Under demon influence the man who said his name was Legion walked about naked, and day and night he cried aloud and slashed himself with stones. All efforts to bind him, even with fetters and chains, were unsuccessful. Christ Jesus, however, freed this man and his companion from the power of the demons. Thereafter the expelled demons took possession of a herd of swine and caused these to rush over a precipice to their death in the Sea of Galilee. Mount 8. 28-34. Mr. 5. 1-20. Lu 8. 26-39. Sigadarans. Swine. For details about the Roman legions, see Army Roman. Habim Habim. A name appearing at Genesis 10. 13 and 1 Chronicles 1. 11 among the descendants of Ham through Mizraim. Since the Hebrew name is a plural form, many scholars hold that a tribe taking its name from one of Mizraim's sons is meant. See, however, Mizraim. The Habim are generally identified with the Libyans and at least seem to have constituted one of the tribes inhabiting Libya in ancient times. While identification is difficult, they were probably the same as the Lumidal.vim mentioned elsewhere in the Hebrew text, as at 2 Chronicles 12. 3, where the American Standard Version reads Lubim and other translations read Libyans. Mo. N.W. R.S. Lehi Jawbone. The scene of one or, possibly, two Israelite victories over the Philistines. Its exact location is unknown today. Some identify it with Kbad Suyag, which perhaps derives its name from the Greek word gon jawbone, less than 3 kilometers to Me'i of Beth Shemesh. At Lehi, Samson struck down 1,000 Philistines with the moist jawbone of an ass. Subsequently he called the site Ramath Lehi, meaning lofty place of the jawbone, probably to memorialize the victory Jehovah had given him there. JG 15. 9-19 Originally, though, Lehi may have got its name from the shape of its crags. Later, according to the rendering of numerous translators, Shammah struck down many Philistines assembled at Lehi. 2 23. 11, 12. At JB, NW, RS however, the Hebrew term la middle.ya literally means into the tent village, and, by a slight change in vowel pointing, is rendered to Lehi. Lamu middle.l belonging to God. An unidentified king of ancient times, whose words are recorded in Proverbs chapter 31. His identity has been the subject of considerable discussion, some commentators suggesting that Lemuel was another name for Solomon. Others identify Lemuel with Hezekiah. The words of King Lemuel constitute the weighty message that his mother gave to him in correction. PR 31. 1. However, the time and circumstances of the king's reception of such information from his mother are unknown. This weighty message advises against involvement with a bad woman, warns of how intoxicating liquor can pervert judgment, highlights the need to judge righteously, and then describes a good wife. 95 Promise. Abraham must have felt agitated, impelled to speak forth about this, particularly to his family, explaining why he was leaving Ur and what God's promise to him was. GE 12. 1-3. 13. 14-17. 22. 15-18 In a similar way, Isaac and Jacob, the inheritors of the promise, were prophets having intimate communication with God. PS 105. 9-15 Additionally, they gave predictive blessings to their sons. GE 27. 27-29, 39, 40. 49. 1-28 With the exception of Job and Elihu, who were evidently used by God prior to the Exodus to reveal divine truths, all true prophets were thereafter drawn from Jacob's descendants the Israelites down till the 1st century of the Common Era. With Moses, the role of the prophet comes into sharper focus. The prophet's position as spokesman for God is emphasized by Jehovah's assignment of Aaron as a prophet or mouth to Moses, while Moses served as God to Aaron. X 4. 16. 7. 1. 2 Moses foretold many events that saw early fulfillment, such as the 10 plagues. However, he served even more impressively as prophet, or spokesman for God, in the delivering of the law covenant at Sinai and in instructing the nation in God's will. Though the law covenant was of immense immediate value to the Israelites as a moral code and guide, it, too, pointed forward to the future and better things to come. 3. 23-25. Heb 8. 6. 9. 23, 24. 10. 1 Moses' intimate, often two-way, communication with God, and the greatly increased understanding of Jehovah's will and purpose he was used to convey, made his prophetic position outstanding. X 6. 2-8. 34. 10. His brother and sister, Aaron and Miriam, also rendered prophetic service in the sense of being transmitters of divine messages or counsel, though not necessarily predictions, as did 70 older men of the nation. Acts 15. 20. New 11. 25. 12. 1-8. Aside from the anonymous man of Judges 6. 8, the only person specifically mentioned in the book of Judges as rendering prophetic service was Deborah the prophetess. JG 4. 4-7. 5. 7. However, the absence of the term (6) does not of itself mean that others did not serve in this capacity. By Samuel's time, word from Jehovah had become rare. There was no vision being spread abroad. From boyhood Samuel served as God's spokesman, and the fulfillment of the divine messages caused all to recognize him as one accredited for the position of prophet to Jehovah. 1 Samuel 3. 1-14, 18-21. With the establishment of the monarchy, an almost continuous line of prophets appears. Compare 3. 24. Gad began prophesying prior to Samuel's death. 1 Samuel 22. 5. 25. 1. And he and the prophet Nathan were prominent during David's reign. 2 Samuel 7. 2-17. 12. 7-15. 24. 11-14, 18. As did other prophets later, they served as royal advisors and historians. 1 Ch 29. 29. 2 Ch 9. 29. 29. 25. 12. 15. 25. 15. 16. David himself was used to deliver certain divine revelations and is called a prophet by the Apostle Peter. Act 2. 25-31, 34. The divided kingdom saw faithful prophets active in the northern and southern kingdoms. Some were used to prophesy to the leaders and people of both kingdoms. Among exilic and post-exilic prophets were Daniel, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. The prophets played a vital role in maintaining true worship. Their activity served as a check on the kings of Israel and Judah, for they boldly reproved erring rulers. 2 Samuel 12. 1-12 and declared God's judgments against those who practiced wickedness. 1 Kai 14. 1-16. 16. 1-7, 12. When the priesthood deviated and suffered corruption, the prophets were Jehovah's means for strengthening the faith of a righteous remnant and for pointing the way back to God's favor for those who had strayed. Like Moses, the prophets on many occasions acted as intercessors, praying to God in behalf of king and people. 9. 18-29. 1 Kai 13. 6. 2 Kai 19. 1-4. Compare Judges 7. 16. 14. 11, 12. They were especially active in times of crises or great textoi acute miritra longo, Prophet 696 under inspiration. Rather, God's Spirit came upon them at certain times, revealing the messages to be announced. As 11. 4, 5. Mic 3. 8. This had a stirring effect upon them, impelling them to speak. 1 Samuel 10. 10. J 20. 7. See Caesar God and Caesar. Among the various kinds of taxes mentioned in the Christian Greek scriptures is telos, an indirect tax, duty, or tribute. Mount 17. 25. Row 13. 7. Also refer to arkenesos, a head or poll tax. Mount 17. 25. 22. 17, 19. Mr. 12. 14 and phoros, a broader term thought to designate a tax levied upon houses, lands, and persons. Lu 20. 22. 23. 2. Tax collector. In the Roman Empire, poll and land taxes were collected by imperial officers as part of their official function. But the authority to collect taxes on exports, imports, and goods taken through a country by merchants was purchased at public auction. Thus the right to collect such taxes went to the highest bidders. When they collected taxes, they made a profit from tax receipts that exceeded the amount of their bid. These men, known as publicans, farmed out to subcontractors the right to collect taxes in certain portions of their territory. The subcontractors, in turn, were in charge of other men who personally collected the taxes. Zacchaeus, for example, appears to have been the chief over the tax collectors in and around Jericho. Luke 19. 1, 2 and Matthew, whom Jesus called to be an apostle, was one who did the actual work of collecting taxes, apparently having his tax office in or near Capernaum. Mount 10. 3. Mr. 2. 1, 14. Thus, in Palestine many Jewish tax collectors were active. They were held in low esteem by their fellow countrymen, since they often exacted more than the tax rate. Mount 5. 46. Luke 3. 12, 13. 19. 7, 8. The other Jews generally avoided voluntary association with tax collectors and classified them with persons known to be sinners, including harlots. Mount 9. 11. 11. 19. 21. 32. Mr. 2. 15. Luke 5. 30. 7. 34. They also resented tax collectors because of their being in the service of a foreign power, Rome, and in close contact with unclean Gentiles. Hence, to treat a brother who proves to be an unrepentant wrongdoer like a tax collector meant having no voluntary association with him. Mount 18. 15-17. Christ Jesus did not condone the corruption prevalent among tax collectors. Though criticized for doing so, he was willing to help spiritually those who manifested a desire to hear him. Mount 9. 9-13. Luke 15. 1-7. In one of his illustrations, Jesus showed that the tax collector who humbly recognized himself as a sinner and repented was more righteous than the Pharisee who proudly viewed himself as righteous. Luke 18. 9-14. And humble, repentant tax collectors like Matthew and Zacchaeus came in line for membership in the Otextoi Acutniritra Longo teacher, teaching 1071 vits, especially the priests, and otherwise men served as teachers. Compare 2 ch 35. 3. J 18. 18. See Education. Prophets. The prophets taught the people about Jehovah's attributes and purposes, exposed the wrongdoing of the Israelites, and outlined the right course for them to take. Often prophets imparted their teaching orally, later committing it to writing. Compare 1 Samuel 12. 23-25. ISA 7. 3, 4. 22. 15, 16. J 2. 2. Their teaching methods included the use of questions J 18. 13, 14. And 3. 3-8. Hag 2. 11-14, Illustrations 2 Sa 12. 1-7. ISA 10. 15. J 18. 3-10, Riddles S 17. 2, and Symbolic Acts 1 K 11. 30-32. J 13. 4-11. 19. 1-12. 27. 2. 28. 10-14. As 4. 1. 5. 4. Priests and Levites. It was the responsibility of the priests and Levites to teach God's law to the nation of Israel. La 10. 11. 14. 57. 2 ch 15. 3. 35. 3. That was accomplished in various ways. Every Sabbath year, during the festival of booths, the entire law was read to all the people. Men, women, children, and alien residents. The 31. 9-13. At times, by getting responses from the people, the Levites would impress the divine laws upon the listeners. Compare to 27. 14-26. Besides reading the law, the 31, 32. Muthlab and Muthlab ben. An expression included in the superscription of one of David's Psalms PS 9, traditionally said to mean concerning the death of the son. Some commentators suggest that it indicated to the musical director the name or perhaps the opening words of a familiar song that furnished the melody to be used in singing this psalm. One possibility of the word's meaning is advanced by the Targum, in which the superscription of Psalm 9 reads, "On the death of the man who came forth from between the camps," alluding to a champion. The apparent reference here is to Goliath, the Philistine champion whom David defeated in battle between the Israelite and Philistine. O textoi acute muritra longo. Mystery 455 is threshing grain. 1t5. 17, 18 Also, as part of Paul's reasoning to show the Corinthians that the Lord ordained for those proclaiming the good news to live by means of the good news, he quoted Deuteronomy 25. 4 and then wrote, "Is it bulls God is caring for? Or is it altogether for our sakes he says it? Really for our sakes it was written, because the man who plows ought to plow in hope and the man who threshes ought to do so in hope of being a partaker." 1 Co 9. 8-14. The psalmist David used muzzle figuratively when he said that he set one as a guard to his mouth to keep from sinning. PS 39. 1. Myra, a major city in the province of Lycia. Situated near the coast of Asia Minor, Myra occupied a hill about 3 kilometers to mainland on the river Andricus. The site is now known as Tema. The ancient name Myra apparently embraced both the city and its excellent harbor. As a prisoner bound for Rome, the Apostle Paul arrived at Myra from Caesarea by way of Sidon. There he and his traveling companions had to transfer to grain ship from Alexandria that was sailing for Italy. Act 27. 1-6, 38 Myra was due of Alexandria and therefore may have been on the regular route of ships from that Egyptian city. Or, it may be that contrary winds. Act 27. 4-7 forced the Alexandrian vessel to change its course and drop anchor at Myra. At Acts 21. 1 Some ancient texts add and Myra after Patara. CJB, NE, RSFTNS. Although this addition would not be out of harmony with the rest of the account, there is insufficient evidence for determining whether the name Myra actually appeared in the original manuscript. Myrrh. An aromatic gum resin. K1. 13. 4. 6, 14. 5. 1, 13 Its precise source in ancient times is uncertain. But generally myrrh is the resin obtained from various thorny shrubs or small trees of the genus Comifera, such as Comifera myrrha or Comifera abyssinica. These shrubs thrive in rocky areas, particularly on limestone hills. Their wood and bark have a strong odor. Although the resin exudes by itself from the stem or from the thick and stiff branches of either variety, the flow can be increased by means of incisions. Initially the resin is soft and sticky but, upon dripping to the ground, it hardens. Myrrh was one of the ingredients for the holy anointing oil. X30. 23-25 Esteemed for its fragrance, it was used to scent garments, beds, and other items. Compare PS 45. 8. PR 7. 17. K3. 6, 7. The Shulamite maiden of the Song of Solomon appears to have applied liquid myrrh to her body before retiring for the night. K5. 2, 5 Massages with oil of myrrh were included in the special beauty treatment given to Esther. As 2. 12 Myrrh was also one of the substances employed in preparing bodies for burial. Joe 19. 39, 40 It was apparently viewed as having sufficient value to be presented as a gift to one born king of the Jews. Mount 2. 1, 2, 11. Myrtle Heb. Headers. The myrtle myrtus communis grows as either a shrub or a tree and is common in Israel and Lebanon, growing well in stony soil. It is capable of reaching a height of 9 meters, 30 feet but is usually found as a shrub 2 to 3 meters, 7 to 10 feet high. An evergreen, it is quite bushy in branch structure and has thick, shiny, dark green leaves. It blossoms with clusters of fragrant white flowers that mature into blue blackberries. Almost the entire plant has a fragrant spicy oil used in perfumes. The berries, though aromatic, are edible. The myrtle is found today particularly in Upper Galilee and the Valley of the Jordan, but it also grows in the Jerusalem area, as it evidently did at the time of Zechariah's vision recorded at Zechariah 1. 8-11, 16. Fragrant branches of myrtle were used along with the branches of other trees to cover the temporary outdoor huts or booths used by the Hebrews during the festival of booths. Eni 8. 14. 15. In the Restoration prophecies the myrtle tree with its otex toi acute miritra longo, 456 Naram pleasant. Son of Caleb, Jephunneh's son, of the tribe of Judah. 1 Ch 4. 1, 15. Naaminara middle dotmer pleasant. 1. Descendant of Cain. Sister of Tubal Cain and the daughter of Lamech by Zillah. Ge 4. 17-19, 22. 2. Ammon, 1 Chronicles 21. 12 says 3. The Greek Septuagint reads 3 in the Samuel account. One prophet explanation is that the 7 years referred to at 2 Samuel would, in part, be an extension of the 3 years of famine that came because of the sin of Saul and his house against the Gibeonites. 2 Sa 21. 1, 2 The current year the registration took 9 months and 20 days. 2 Sa 24. 8 would be the 4th, and 3 years to come would make 7. Although the difference may have been due to a copyist's error, it may be said again that a full knowledge of all the facts and circumstances should be his before one reaches such a conclusion. For the temple service. Sometime later David, who was now quite old, had the Levites numbered for future temple service, with Jehovah's apparent approval. This count revealed that there were 38,000 Levites 30 years of age and upward, all able-bodied men. They were listed as follows. 24,000 supervisors, 6,000 officers and judges, 4,000 gatekeepers, and 4,000 musicians. 1 Ch 23. 1-5. In connection with the building of the temple we read. Then Solomon took account of all the men that were alien residents, who were in the land of Israel, after the census that David his father had taken of them. And there came to be found 153,600. So he made 70,000 of them burden bearers, and 80,000 cutters in the mountain, and 3,600 overseers for keeping the people in service. 2 Ch 2. 17, 18. Later registrations. There were other registrations carried out by succeeding kings of Israel and Judah. In the days of King Amaziah the men in Otextoi acute miritra longo, Habom 767 edict of the emperor proved providential, for it compelled Joseph and Mary to journey from the city of Nazareth to Bethlehem in spite of the fact that Mary was then heavy with child. Thus Jesus was born in the city of David in fulfillment of prophecy. Lu 2. 4-7. Mic 5. 2. 2 registrations under Quirinius. Bible critics have said that the only census taken while Publius Sulpicius Quirinius was governor of Syria was about 6 CE, which event sparked a rebellion by Judas the Galilean and the Zealots. Act 5. 37. This was really the second registration under Quirinius, for inscriptions discovered at Amnia Antosh revealed that some years earlier Quirinius had served as the emperor's legate in Syria. The bearing of a recent discovery on the trustworthiness of the New Testament, by W. Ramsey, 1979, pages 285, 291 concerning this, the Dictionnaire du Nouveau Testament in Crampon's French Bible 1939 ed. p. 360 says. The scholarly researchers of Zompt comment at Epigraph 2, 86-104. The Syria Romana Provincia, 97-98, and of Mommsen res gesta divi Augusti place beyond doubt that Quirinius was twice governor of Syria. Many scholars locate the time of Quirinius' first governorship as somewhere between the years 4 and 1 BCE, probably from 3 to 2 BCE. Their method of arriving at these dates, however, is not solid, and the actual period of this governorship remains indefinite. See Quirinius. His second governorship, however, included 6 CE according to details reported by Josephus. Jewish Antiquities, 18, 26-1. So historian and Bible writer Luke was correct when he said concerning the registration at the time of Jesus' birth. This first registration took place when Quirinius was governor of Syria, distinguishing it from the second, which occurred later under the same Quirinius, and to which Gamaliel makes reference as reported by Luke at Acts 5:37. Regret. See repentance. By our Jehovah has wide and made spacious. Grandson of